Ave Maris Stella.
Hello and welcome back to Vatican II in a Year. This is your host, Father Matthew Schneider. I am a priest of the Church of Christ and a theology professor. This is a podcast on the Star Quest Production Network at sqpn.com. Today we're on day 27. We're covering Sacrosanctum Concilium 95 to 98 on the obligation to pray the Liturgy of the Hours. We're in chapter 4, the Divine Office. If you want to follow along, we have a reading plan and more details at sqpn.com/Vatican. If you are watching this, listening to this right away, you will notice there are two copies. This is the correct one as noted in the file name. I made a mistake. I don't know how the same kind of file error that happened beforehand happened again on this one, but only a part of it. I noticed as soon as I uploaded it, and then I re-recorded it right that night, because I usually upload these at about 9 p.m. my time, because I'm on the West Coast. That works. But anyways, that just so you know why there might be two. This is being recorded 9 p.m. on the 26th of January, the day before day 26. Anyway, so yesterday we talked about rules for revising liturgy hours, and today we're talking about the obligation of priests, religious, and consecrated persons to pray the liturgy hours. Right? So this is, obviously lay people are not obliged, most of you are not obliged, but this is important. It might not be as important to most of the audience because most of the audience, I presume, is lay people, but it is important just to know the general idea of this, and it's going to go a little quicker, right? So paragraph 95 is about praying the breviary in choir. Choir is usually refers to either a cathedral chapter, like a group of priests around the bishop of the cathedral, or a monastery. If you ever go into a big church and they have those kind of pews right at the front that kind of go facing each other, those are the choir for the monks to pray in. So let's read the text. Communities obliged to choral office are bound to celebrate the office in choir every day in addition to the conventual Mass. In particular, A. Orders of canons, of monks and of nuns, and of the regulars bound by law or constitutions of choral office must celebrate the entire office. Cathedral or collegiate chapters are bound to recite those parts of the office imposed on them by the general or particular law. C. All members of above communities who are in major orders or who are solemnly professed, except for lay brothers, are bound to recite individually those canonical hours they do not pray in choir. So as I noted beforehand, this is about certain types of religious life, certain types of consecration, where they have this as part of it, right? So more monastic forms, my own community, we don't pray in choir most of the time. We pray liturgy hours together occasionally, but not in the choir like that. And their obligation to pray those other hours, if not in the choir, is important, right? And such. So let's move on to paragraph 96, which is talking about all clerics. Clerics here means anyone who has received the sacraments of orders, whether including deacons, priests, and bishops. They may have something, I don't know if it mentions deacons. These are not necessarily obliged to pray the entire hour. They're usually obliged to pray lauds and vespers, but that can vary a little bit place to place. But priests and bishops and transitional deacons, those who are deacons of the way of the priest, that are obliged to pray at all. But let's read the text. Appropriate instances are to be defined by the rubrics in which liturgical service may be substituted for the divine... Oh, sorry. I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm sorry to read 97. Clerics not bound to the office in choir, if they are in major orders, are bound to pray the entire office every day, either in community or individually, as laid down in Article 89. Major orders, now we just say holy orders. That was a term change that came later on, right after Vatican II. They used to be minor orders. Now those are just the ministries like acolyte and lector. So that's the idea. And now we're going to move to paragraph 97 about it not necessarily being always in every single case obligatory, which is what I started reading beforehand, but let's read it. Appropriate instances are to be defined by the rubrics in which the liturgical service may be substituted for the divine office. In particular cases, and for a just reason, ordinaries can dispense their subjects wholly or in part from the obligation of reciting the divine office, or may commute the obligation. So there are certain cases where there is an office or a liturgical celebration that needs to take place. For example, if you do not make the Easter Vigil, there is a office of readings, a longer office of readings for Easter that you have to pray. I think some of the readings are actually the same as the long vigil where you have all the readings beforehand at Easter. And other things, for example, I knew of an older priest who, still lived alone, and the bishop said, hey, like your eyesight's going, you can't really see it. And this was before you had, now you have audio versions that are very easily accessible. This was, several decades back. That wasn't accessible. So the bishop said, hey, just pray a full 15-decade rosary every day. in place that because you can't see it. You can't read it. So, and things like that. Bishops may have some ceremony that takes place at a convocation, things like that. And it's important not to assume that we can just skip it if we don't want to or if something comes up. But there are cases where the office can be skipped. Sometimes it's also like, hey, we're going to this big solemn Vespers. And well, yeah, I don't have to pray Vespers at home or something like that, right? And even if we pray some other one, it can take the place. Like, for example, there's certain parts of the extraordinary form one, or if I go to an Eastern Rite parish and I pray Vespers with them, I don't need to then go and pray my Latin Vespers afterwards. Latin just being the Latin Church, like the Roman Catholic Church, as opposed to the Ukrainian Catholic Church, not Latin, and necessarily praying them in Latin, although sometimes I do. So paragraph 98 is about changes in the hours. So this is just changes that they're going to talk about later on, I think. So let's read it. Members of any institute dedicated to acquiring perfection who, according to their constitution, are to recite any parts of the divine office are thereby performing the public prayer of the church. They too perform the public prayer of the church who, in virtue of their constitution, recite the short office, provided this is drawn up after the pattern of the divine office and is duly approved. So here, as institute dedicated to acquiring perfection has a pretty broad definition. Religious, like myself, Societies of Apostolic Life, secular institutes, some approved associates of the faithful, especially ones that are moving towards that or are consecrated lay people and things like that. And this is important because all of us need to pray for the whole church, and it's a public prayer. The divine office is a public prayer, a prayer for the whole church, not just a private prayer. Even if I'm just praying in my room, it's not a private prayer just for myself. No, it's for all of you. It's for the whole church. And therefore, also here they talk about, according to their constitutions, ours say, once you have, we pray very few of them before ordination, but then after ordination, we have to pray them all as clerics, right? And then also short ones, so they'll have like the little office of the Blessed Virgin, you may have heard of. Some communities will just pray that as part of it, but it all just varies. So thank you for listening to this episode of Vatican II in a Year. This is a listener-supported podcast. You can donate to help StarQuest produce another great podcast at sqpn.com/give. You can give one time, monthly, or join the StarQuest Patreon. Tomorrow, we are going to continue on the next paragraphs of Sacro Sanctum Chilium, which is paragraphs 99 to 101, on other ways to pray the Liturgy of the Hours. Please join us then to learn more about Vatican II, which can be a blueprint for the Catholic Church. Go to sqpn.com/Vatican, frmatthewlc.com/Vatican, or Vatican SQPN on Facebook and X for more information on the podcast, like playlists for individual documents and a reading plan.
Amen.